Blog Talk Radio, the world's largest online radio network.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Movie Addict Headquarters with your host, Betty Jo Tucker, author of Confessions of a Movie Addict, right here at www.blogtalkradio.com.
Hi, all you movie fans out there. Thanks so much for tuning into this special Movie Addict Headquarters episode. I'm your host, Betty Jo Tucker, speaking to you from Pueblo, Colorado, and feeling sad today about the recent passing of Elizabeth Taylor, one of Hollywood's greatest stars. But I'm glad that Jazz Shaw and Joan Benedict Steiger are here to help us with the show. We'll be talking about Elizabeth Taylor's best films and performances, as well as sharing some personal memories of her. Then, later in the show, there may be calls from fans who want to share their reactions, too. I don't want to forget to mention that Demos Yanikos is taking care of our chat, and we really appreciate that. I see that Joan and Jazz have been waiting patiently, so I'd like to bring them on now, starting with Joan, who must have had an exciting time last night at the Los Angeles Women's Theater Group Gala, where she received an important award for her remarkable acting career and life achievements. Joan, congratulations on your well-deserved honor.
Well, thank you so much. Yes, the Los Angeles Women's Theater Festival honored me with a lovely award for mainly for all the theater work that I've done. When I kind of looked, I couldn't believe that I've done over 40 plays. And I said, my gosh, did I memorize all those lines? Anyway, it was lovely, and I was up kind of late, so it's very early, and I'm kind of half awake, but I'm happy to do the show.
Well, we really appreciate you being here today after all that excitement, and we're eager to hear about your interesting Butterfield 8 connection with Elizabeth Taylor, because we know you, besides theater, you've also done films and television. But first, let's bring Jazz on. Jazz, thanks for agreeing to co-host today, even though we're on a different schedule.
Oh, no problem, Betty Jo. It's a sad but important occasion, so I can carve out a little time from the political schedule for this. It just has to be done.
I'm so glad you could do that. If some of our listeners don't know, Jazz Shaw is the host of a very, very informative midstream radio show on Blog Talk Radio, and we're so happy when he's able to take some time away from politics and co-host our show. He does such an excellent job. And Jazz, I'm curious to find out which Elizabeth Taylor films and performances you think are her best, but let's save that until we hear from Joan about her Butterfield 8 involvement. Joan, I remember that Elizabeth earned her first Oscar for Butterfield 8. What was your connection to that project?
Well, first of all, let me tell you, it's the first time I have ever spoken about it, and it's on your show.
Well, thank you.
I was just 18. I was starting out in New York as an actress, and I constantly bothered the MGM casting director. So I got this call from him, and he said, Joan, I think I've got something wonderful for you. It's a great opportunity. And I was just still a teenager. I was like 19, almost 20. And he said, Elizabeth Taylor is going to be doing a film in New York. Of course, I was in New York at the time. And he said, Daniel Mann is going to be directing. Danny Mann was a very important director at the time, had done a lot of Broadway, and so they were very excited about the film. However, he said, Elizabeth does not want to do this film. And Danny, being a Broadway director, liked a lot of rehearsal. So she said, well, I will, and Danny wanted Elizabeth to rehearse. So she said, well, I'll do the film, but I will not come to New York to rehearse the film. And she had to do this film because otherwise she would not have gotten Cleopatra. So she agreed to do it. She said, if you'll get somebody to rehearse the whole movie with Danny Mann. Well, I auditioned for Danny, and he said, well, now that I see you, and I was brunette at the time, now that I see you, I'd like you to double for her also in the film and stand in for her and be with me here at all times. So I auditioned and read for him and got the job. Now, it was probably one of the most unique jobs because it was not exactly stand-in, not exactly double. It was different. So when I started, I did all the rehearsals with Lawrence Harvey, and it was very, very exciting. It was done up at Gold Medal Studios in the Bronx. And we rehearsed for a month or two, and then Elizabeth came in and watched rehearsals and so forth, and then started the film. Well, we were doing the rehearsals and so forth, and then started the film, and lo and behold, there was a SAG strike, Screen Actors Guild strike. So the whole cast, except me, went back to California, and that it was a long strike, I think about a month, and then everybody came back again. This became a whole career, and we did the film. So it was a very exciting thing for me, and that was how I met Elizabeth Taylor, and she was completely charming to me, and she had a little Yorkie that used to follow her around on the set, and I have to say she was a very intuitive actress. Everything she did was like one take, and really fabulous.
Wow! And you said that she didn't want to do Butterfield 8, but she had to do it, or she wouldn't be able to do Cleopatra.
Yes,
well, that's
interesting.
Correct.
And this was done under protest. And
she won an Oscar for it, and didn't win an Oscar for Cleopatra. But she still, as I understand it, she still, even when she received the Oscar, she didn't think that she deserved the Oscar. I heard that she felt that she got the pity vote because of the illness that she had just gone through. Do you remember any of that?
Well, she was never well. And at that time had just had the tracheotomy.
Yes.
So, yes. She just had one illness after another. However, I really loved her, but she loved to eat, and all the wrong foods.
Yes.
I mean, it was chili and pasta and pizzas, and Mm-hmm.
That sounds like my diet, if it's as long as it's meatless. But I understand that you and your late husband Rod Steiger were friends with Elizabeth Taylor, and there were some interesting incidents, or at least one that happened. Could you tell us about that?
Yes, it was all kind of intertwined because then, at that time, I still did not know Rod, but I was always a huge fan of Rod's and had seen everything. I think I saw Al Capone about 15 times, and I was just very concentrated on Rod at the time. But it was shortly after Butterfield 8, I did do a television show with Rod, And that's when I met him for the first time, and we started dating in New York. That's before we ever got together 30 years later out here in California and got married. So our lives were always intertwined. But now Rod didn't meet Elizabeth till years later, and he told me he had this wonderful script. It was sort of a present-day Wizard of Oz kind of a thing. And he, when we were going together out here in California in later years, he said, I want to get to Elizabeth Taylor because I want to get her as in the role of Dorothy, a kind of older woman, eccentric woman, who thought she was Dorothy kind of character and eccentric, and was trying to get back to Oz. Well, on the way in the script, this Dorothy meets all of these characters, which would be modern-day versions of the Tin Man and the Cowardly Lion and so forth. It was such a good script. So he did not know Elizabeth at the time and was trying to contact her. Well, finally, he told me one day, he said, well, I finally contacted Elizabeth, and I'm going over to see her. Well, he met her at her home, and he was shocked to see her because she was in bed and had been in bed ill for about a year. And Rod was this wonderful, wonderful man and so compassionate. And he said to her, What are you doing in bed? You're Elizabeth Taylor. You've got to get out of that bed. And he said, how about if I take you to lunch? Well, she just brightened up, he said. And she said, oh, really? Well, that was the time, a few years back, when she was really out of commission in bed. And he got her back again out into the public. It was Rod that did that. Well, before you know it, they were going to lunch and talking about the script, and all the papers, Enquirer and all the papers had them in the magazine, and before you know it, they were saying Elizabeth Taylor to marry Rod Steiger.
I remember reading that.
Yeah, and so I said to Rod, well, what's this about? He said, Joan, please. So then a few years passed. We were on a plane going to Barcelona, and he and I love to read all of the papers, Enquirer and Globe, all those. So he said, pick up the magazines before we get on the plane. So I've got the magazines. We're sitting on the plane. Rod's sitting next to me. We're on our way to Barcelona. I look at the paper, and it says, Elizabeth Taylor to marry Rod Steiger. I looked over at him. I said, what? He looked at me. He said, Joan, I'm sitting here next to you. Oh, gosh. So,
my gosh.
You can believe, a bit of what you hear, and I think she would have loved to have married Rod. She loved Rod. Everybody loved Rod. And Rod asked me to marry him, and then when we were about to get married, she said to me on the phone, well, how did that happen? I said, well, he asked me to marry him. What do you mean, how did that happen? But anyway, it was very interesting, and so that connection happened again with Elizabeth. She was so wonderful. When Rod died, she called me. We had a long conversation, and the interesting thing was the man she talked about was Mike Todd. And yes. So, and we had several lovely conversations, and we had, got together a few times. So that was my connection.
Well, it's so wonderful to have someone on the show who actually new Elizabeth Taylor, Joan, and thanks so much for sharing this personal information with us. Now, I hope you can stay with us for the show. I know you have a busy schedule, but can you stay on while we talk about some of Elizabeth Taylor's best films and performances? Would you be able to do that?
Yes, I can stay a little while.
Oh, fine. That's wonderful. I see we have a caller already, so I'm going to see who's calling. Hello, area code 858. Who's calling, please?
Well, this is your favorite film critic, James Colt Harrison, out here in beautiful La Jolla.
Oh, I'm so glad you called in, James. Now, Joan, James is a film historian, and he actually did a history of MGM where Elizabeth made quite a few films. So James, thank you for calling in. Do you have any comments for Joan about the incidents and information that she shared with us?
Well, I can only tell you my encounter with Elizabeth Taylor. I was 19 years old, and I was starry-eyed, and of course I loved the movies and had always wanted to get involved with the movies in some way. And I was in Hollywood visiting some friends who were in the movie business, and we went to Grauman's Chinese Theater to see a movie. And I was standing in the lobby at the time, just waiting around, and up come the aisle is Elizabeth Taylor. Well, I nearly fainted. She was the most beautiful creature I had ever seen in my life. And you know what? Her eyes really were lavender. I think I probably was about 2 feet in front of her, so I was very close. She was young and beautiful at that time, and that was the first encounter I ever had with Elizabeth Taylor. I didn't know her, and I actually never got the chance to interview her during my career, but I wish I had. And then maybe 20 years later, or 30 years later, I had a writing assignment to cover her introduction of her White Diamonds perfume at Macy's. And so I went down as a dutiful reporter, and my God, the place was pandemonium because there were thousands of people waiting for Elizabeth to come out on stage. Well, she kept us waiting an hour, as usual, and people were getting a little bit grumpy. Well, I guess she knew the exact time to come out because she created an uproar, and she came out in this beautiful white caftan outfit and covered in diamonds, pushing her White Diamonds perfume. Well, again, I mean, it looked like she hadn't changed a bit in the 20 years since I had seen her last. But she was gorgeous and just as charming as can be, just as everybody has said. She was really a sweet, down-to-earth movie star. You'd never know she was a movie
great
star.
Beauty. I mean, you mentioned
her
beauty.
Great beauty. Absolutely the most beautiful movie star ever, I think.
Yes, I agree with you on that. Well, you were so lucky then to get a chance to see Elizabeth those 2 times, and James, can you stay for the rest of the show because
sure.
There may be some other areas that you would like to chime in on. Would that be
sure.
okay?
Oh, I'd love to. Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, why don't we turn to to Elizabeth's best films and best performances, and I really am curious to know what picks Jazz will come up with. So Jazz, what do you think are Elizabeth Taylor's best performances in films?
It's hard to narrow it down to just a few, but one of them was already mentioned when Joan was relating that story, because I did think, even though it didn't win the award, I thought Cleopatra was really fantastic. The other couple that I would certainly bring up would be Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, which was just a haunting film. I saw that one so many times. And probably just for one of those best screen matchups, The Taming of the Shrew. because her work, particularly with Richard Burton, was they were one of those just sizzling screen couples. I always talk about Bogey and Bacall, and different people from that era, but they were certainly a great couple, and that was probably one of my favorites.
Good choices, Jazz. Do you agree with Jazz, Joan, or do you have? Of course, we're not going to include Butterfield 8 because we've already talked about that. But do you have other picks of Liz's best performances in films?
Well, actually, I was going to pick Virginia Woolf also. So I do remember her saying to the makeup people, "Now be careful, don't make me too ugly." But I just thought she was excellent in Virginia Woolf, and I always enjoyed Giant a lot. And when we first met, and she had said to me, "Oh, Benedict," she said, and she always had that childlike voice. Oh, Benedict," she said, "that was my name in Giant." Yeah.
Well,
by the way, she was very childlike,
Betty Jo, I don't know if you're going to get time for it, but Demos did want me to let you know that you do have another listener who's called in on line 3, and that would be Bob, if you get time for it.
Oh, yes, of course. I wanted to find out first, and thank you very much for that information, but I wanted to check with James to see if he had any favorite films and performances by Elizabeth Taylor. So, James, you're on.
Well, yes, Joan stole my thunder. I did love Giant. I thought it was a wonderful picture, and it was a giant movie with such a stellar cast, including Mercedes McCambridge, who was a La Jolla resident. Mercedes lived here in La Jolla before she passed away. And, of course, Rock Hudson and James Dean. I mean, how can you have a better cast than that? But the movie itself was terrific. And I also liked Suddenly Last Summer, which was rather a spooky kind of a movie, but with Katharine Hepburn, and it was such a terrific film with great actresses. And Elizabeth did very well in that, I thought.
Yes. So that was one of my favorites too.
Yeah.
And I loved so many of her films. It definitely is hard to choose from, but I think if I had to choose, it would be National Velvet and Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf and A Place in the Sun. I thought the chemistry between Montgomery Clift and Elizabeth Taylor in A Place in the Sun was just it was so vivid on screen. And,
it was. They were terrific.
So those would be my choices. But again, there are many others that I really, really like. But let's take this next call, and let's do it now. Hello, area code 954. Who's calling?
Yeah, it's your old friend Wacko Bob here, actually, and boy, a lot of thunder was stolen from me because I, as far as Elizabeth Taylor's movies go, the one I always love to put over is Giant because I've been an absolute James Dean fan for a long time, even though he died before I was born. But if you really look at the movie Giant, and I think everyone here will agree with me, Rock Hudson and James Dean both did fabulous jobs in the movie and everything. But let's face the facts here. Elizabeth Taylor really carried that entire movie in all reality. I think we all would agree with that movie was carried by her more than those two guys and the others that were in the movie too.
Oh yes, she was excellent in that movie. Absolutely. Are there other films of Elizabeth Taylor's that you particularly enjoyed, Wacko Bob?
Oh, I agree. I agree in a lot of ways. I liked how she worked with Montgomery Clift, and I think more specifically in that movie alone, was another good one with Elizabeth Taylor. I've been a fan more or less of Elizabeth Taylor, and more the work that she's done, for AIDS awareness and everything, that no one was willing to to come to the plate for and everything when it was really becoming a problem, throughout the world and everything, and the one who stepped up to the plate, to really be the spokesperson for AIDS awareness was Elizabeth Taylor, and she took some shots and everything for it, but she just kept going on with it, and you got to respect her for that one because, I think more people became aware of the HIV virus, and everything, more because of, the speeches by Elizabeth Taylor and what she said, what needs to be done to prevent this.
Yes, that's a very good point. I'm glad you brought that up, and I'm so glad that you called, Wacko Bob. And for listeners who don't know, Wacko Bob is a very popular host on Blog Talk Radio also. Wacko Bob, give a little plug for your wonderful Blog Talk Radio show.
We are a 3-hour show every Saturdays at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We are a variety show. We'll talk about anything that might be on your mind, no matter what it is. And tomorrow, and for those who don't know, tomorrow is Saturday. And if you got any comments or anything, you want to bring up anything Elizabeth Taylor there, you could actually do it on the Wacko Weekly tomorrow as well, too. But let's keep things on with Elizabeth Taylor and this great tribute that's being done to her.
Thank you, Wacko Bob. I do encourage listeners to check out your show. And you were saying that there were so many films that Elizabeth Taylor made, and we're agreeing that it's kind of hard to pick favorites. And I was jotting down some of the films that I have seen, and I just kind of feel like I grew up with Elizabeth Taylor, and so I have seen most of her films. I haven't seen the ones that she did for television, but she actually made, I believe, around 50 Hollywood films. And here are the ones that I've actually seen: Ash Wednesday, Ivanhoe, Giant, Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, A Place in the Sun, National Velvet, Cleopatra, Cynthia, Raintree County, again with Montgomery Clift, The Sandpiper. We've already mentioned Butterfield 8, Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. Oh, wow, that one, she really sizzled in that one, too. Elephant Walk, The Taming of the Shrew, Father of the Bride, The Mirror Cracked. Oh, that was an Agatha Christie mystery, and she and Angela Lansbury starred in that. Little Women, we've already mentioned Suddenly Last Summer, and in Dr. Faustus, she played Helen of Troy, kind of typecasting.
Oh,
A Little Night Music, and Reflections in a Golden Eye. And her last movie, I thought she was great in, The Flintstones. So I know those are not all of her films, but Joan, do you have any comments on any of the other films that were mentioned?
That was interesting when you just mentioned Dr. Faustus. That was the first play that I did in New York, Dr. Faustus. I never knew.
Yes, I was hoping you'd catch that.
Yes, that's the one with the famous line, "Is this the face that launched 1,000 ships?"
Right. And
yes,
she fit that bill.
I remember I came cascading down a winding staircase, and then that was the speech. Is that the face that launched 1,000 ships? I never knew she did Dr. Faustus.
Well, I'm just wondering if James has any other comments he'd like to make about any of these films that I mentioned.
Well, gosh, I'm sort of like you, Betty Jo. I feel like I grew up with Elizabeth Taylor, watching her throughout the years, and she did make 50 films. I probably saw most of them, I would think. And,
I'll bet you did.
Yeah, and one interesting thing is Elephant Walk, which she made with
yes, I hoped you'd talk about that.
Yeah, she made that with Peter Finch, and she replaced Vivian Leigh in that film because Vivian Leigh was having one of her psychotic episodes, and she had to leave the film, and she flew back to Los Angeles, and they had to replace her. And so they got Elizabeth Taylor. There were some scenes in The Elephant Walk that were actually Vivian Leigh, but they were more or less faraway shots, and her back, so they could very easily insert Elizabeth Taylor into it, and so Peter Finch actually was having an affair with Vivien Leigh at the time, and it was a big scandal at the time, but anyway, Elizabeth took over the role.
Gossip.
I love the gossip, yes.
That's
what
I thought that was...
Movies. We love movie stars because they do create gossip, and that's one of the...
That's true.
Yeah. So
we love the... Well, I first saw Elizabeth Taylor in National Velvet, and I was just spellbound. What a great movie that is. A family classic for sure. Mickey Rooney was the jockey, and Elizabeth Taylor played this young girl who persuaded him to train her to ride in the Grand National Steeplechase. And Elizabeth Taylor was just terrific then, and I knew at the time I just wanted to follow everything that she did, and that was back in 1944. But she did made quite a few movies as a teenager. I think she was in A Date with Judy. We didn't even put that on the list. And this Cynthia, she was the young sickly girl who sort of found some happiness through music. But every decade she just blossomed. And I loved what Joan said about Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, telling the makeup lady not to make her look too ugly, but she was a force of nature in Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, and she is Martha and George, Richard Burton as George, and they were soon to divorce, I think, for the first time after that movie. But the tension between those two and the way they could put down each other, it was something to behold. Didn't you think so, Jazz?
Oh yeah, that was another classic moment, and it goes back to what I was saying earlier. It's so hard to pick because you know me, I've always been a fan of. To this day, I watch more black and white films than I do color films, I think, and most of my library is old ancient stuff. So that really gets into what I like, but. I'm not going to hog up the whole show. I was just asked by Demos to mention to you that there's another old friend of the show on line 4 right now with some comments about Liz Taylor, if you have time and want to pick it up.
Oh, absolutely. Let's do that right now. Thanks, Demos. Area code 917. You're on the air. Who's calling, please?
Hi, Betty. It's Nancy Lombardo.
Oh, Nancy from Comedy Concepts. We have a Blog Talk Radio reunion here. Nancy has a great show on Blog Talk Radio.
All these shows.
So, Nancy.
Thank you.
Do you have something to share?
Yes, I did back in my early stand-up comedy days while I was supplementing my income by bartending on Malcolm Forbes' yacht. And I met Elizabeth Taylor there several times. And I just wanted to share that in person, she was the nicest, most accommodating person. I thought that what would have put other people over the edge in this day and age with people, oh, Miss Taylor, can I take your picture? And just leaning on her. And she was so gracious about it. I said, oh, my gosh, that's a star. Putting up with that. She was just so wonderfully gracious about it. Oh, of course, dear, you may, of course. But then I just wanted briefly to add, because this show's running out of time, my favorite line from a movie. Well, two things. One thing is, everybody forgets she was in Jane Eyre. She plays the girl who gets
a little
sick.
girl.
She's the little girl who gets sick. And so she was in Jane Eyre, and I love that. But my favorite line from all movies, and I say this all the time because it always stuck with me, my favorite line from Suddenly Last Summer is when Katharine Hepburn goes to her, I don't understand why you won't have that little procedure. It's just a little procedure. And Elizabeth Taylor goes, little procedure? They call it a lobotomy.
Yeah.
So I love that line. And I just wanted to share. But love your show, Betty. I love that line.
Well, thank you. I forgot about it completely. Thanks for reminding us, and thank you for calling in. Tell everyone about your Comedy Concepts show too.
Oh,
Nancy,
Comedy Concepts! I'll be on at 1 o'clock today. Comedy Concepts,
Yay.
Blog Talk Radio. But I don't want to eat into your time. So have a good show, Betty. I'll be listening.
Well, thank you. Thanks again for calling in. Jazz, are there any comments from the or reactions from the chat that you'd like to share with us?
Well, mostly we've just been trying to feed them through and encouraging them to call. A lot of agreement about the shows that were mentioned, and quite a few votes for Montgomery Cliff as one of the best pairings. There was one other question for Joan that came up, and I'll be honest, I don't know the background about this, but I'll go ahead and mention it anyhow in case she has some insight to share. Something about the dark secrets of a closed set on Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf?
No, I don't know about. No, I'm sorry, I don't know any of that. I do know that on Butterfield 8. I guess maybe you all know that she got Eddie Fisher to do Butterfield 8 with her. And at the rap party, she said to Eddie, she said, "Oh, Eddie, sing Tammy, Tammy's in love."
Tammy's in love. Well, she had the. I know this is supposed to be a solemn occasion, but Elizabeth Taylor, I've heard, had a wonderful sense of humor, and that kind of proves it, Joan. So this is the time when I'd like to describe my fantasy about having dinner with her. And even though this whole scene is imaginary, it was a lot of fun to write, and I think Elizabeth would have enjoyed it. And the fantasy came about back in 2001 when my husband and I had big plans to participate in the Taos Talking Pictures Festival because we were going to get to meet Elizabeth Taylor at her Maverick Award presentation there. Well, unfortunately, our plans fell flat. Actually, I'm the one who took the fall by tripping in the bathroom and suffering a head and an arm injury. So when I broke the news about not being able to cover the festival because of a clumsy accident, one of my editors said, "Oh, just make something up." So I did. And here's the piece that I turned in. Never underestimate the power of imagination. That's how, while recuperating from injuries, I took a magic carpet ride to Taos, New Mexico for the April film festivities there. Of course, dinner with a Hollywood legend emerged as the highlight of this trip. Everyone knows Elizabeth Taylor is the last of the great movie stars, so it was a thrill to see her receive a tribute for her incredible acting career. She deserves as many awards as she can get after over 50 years as a Hollywood leading lady. Well, immediately following this tribute, Larry and I joined Liz for dinner at the Holiday Inn Don Fernando. Oh, she looked lovely in a white jacket that contrasted dramatically with her dark hair and famous violet eyes. After congratulating her on such an amazing film career, I told her what my mother did when MGM was searching for a child to star in National Velvet. She sent the studio a picture of me riding a horse, I said. I wonder how many other mothers did the same thing, Liz mused. But I think you're lucky you didn't get the part, dear. I hurt my back while filming National Velvet, and that was probably the beginning of all my health problems. Then Larry pointed to my cast and added, Betty Jo's had her share of those, too. Looks like both of you are real survivors. And you are a real sweetheart, Liz tossed back at him flirtatiously. Suddenly, it dawned on me that Liz is between husbands now. No wonder I breathed a sigh of relief when dinner was over. After all, this is my fantasy, not Larry's. Rest in peace, dear Elizabeth. Your many fans will miss you. Well, I see it's time to wrap up the show. So thanks to Joan, Jazz, James, Wacko Bob, Nancy, Demos, all the people in the chat for making this a very special episode. And thanks also to Elizabeth Taylor for leaving us those terrific performances to remember as time goes by.
Blog Talk Radio, where millions of hosts and listeners gather.
If some of our listeners don't know, Jazz Shaw is the host of a very, very informative midstream radio show on Blog Talk Radio, and we're so happy when he's able to take some time away from politics and co-host our show. He does such an excellent job. And you know, Jazz, I'm curious to find out which Elizabeth Taylor films and performances you think are her best. But let's save that until we hear from Joan about her Butterfield 8 involvement. Joan, I remember that Elizabeth earned her first Oscar for Butterfield 8. What was your connection to that project?
Well, first of all, let me tell you, it's the first time I have ever spoken about it, and it's on your show.
Well, thank you.
I was just 18. I was starting out in New York as an actress, and I constantly bothered the MGM casting director. So I got this call from him, and he said, "Joan, I think I've got something wonderful for you. It's a great opportunity." And I was just still a teenager. I was like 19, almost 20. And he said, "Elizabeth Taylor is going to be doing a film in New York." Now, it was probably one of the most unique jobs because it was not exactly stand-in, not exactly double. It was different. So when I started, I did all the rehearsals with Lawrence Harvey, and it was very, very exciting. It was done up at Gold Medal Studios in the Bronx. And we rehearsed for a month or two, and then Elizabeth came in and watched rehearsals and so forth, and then started the film. Well, we were doing the rehearsals and so forth, and then started the film, and lo and behold, there was a SAG strike, Screen Actors Guild strike. So the whole cast, except me, went back to California, and that it was a long strike, I think about a month, and then everybody came back again. This became a whole career, and we did the film. So it was a very exciting thing for me, and that was how I met Elizabeth Taylor, and she was completely charming to me.
Blog Talk Radio, the world's largest online radio network.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Movie Addict Headquarters with your host, Betty Jo Tucker, author of Confessions of a Movie Addict, right here at www.blogtalkradio.com.
Hi, all you movie fans out there. Thanks so much for tuning into this special Movie Addict Headquarters episode. I'm your host, Betty Jo Tucker, speaking to you from Pueblo, Colorado, and feeling sad today about the recent passing of Elizabeth Taylor, one of Hollywood's greatest stars. but I'm glad that Jazz Shaw and Joan Benedict Steiger are here to help us with the show. We'll be talking about Elizabeth Taylor's best films and performances, as well as sharing some personal memories of her. Then, later in the show, there may be calls from fans who want to share their reactions, too. I don't want to forget to mention that Demos Yanikos is taking care of our chat, and we really appreciate that. I see that Joan and Jazz have been waiting patiently, so I'd like to bring them on now, starting with Joan, who must have had an exciting time last night at the Los Angeles Women's Theater Group.
Of course, I was in New York at the time, and he said, Daniel Mann is going to be directing. Danny Mann was a very important director at the time, had done a lot of Broadway, and so they were very excited about the film. However, he said, Elizabeth does not want to do this film. And Danny, being a Broadway director, liked a lot of rehearsal. So she said, well, I will, and Danny wanted Elizabeth to rehearse. So she said, well, I'll do the film, but I will not come to New York to rehearse the film. And she had to do this film because otherwise she would not have gotten Cleopatra. So she agreed to do it. She said, if you'll get somebody to rehearse the whole movie with Danny Mann. Well, I auditioned for Danny, and he said, well, now that I see you, and I was brunette at the time, now that I see you, I'd like you to double for her also in the film and stand in for her and be with me here at all times. So I auditioned and read for him and got the job.
Where she received an important award for her remarkable acting career and life achievements. Joan, congratulations on your well-deserved honor.
Well, thank you so much. Yes, the Los Angeles Women's Theater Festival honored me with a lovely award for mainly for all the theater work that I've done. When I kind of looked, I couldn't believe that I've done over 40 plays. And I said, my gosh, did I memorize all those lines? Anyway, it was lovely, and I was up kind of late, so it's very early, and I'm kind of half awake, but I'm happy to do the show.
Well, we really appreciate you being here today after all that excitement, and we're eager to hear about your interesting Butterfield 8 connection with Elizabeth Taylor, because we know you've, besides theater, you've also done films and television. But first, let's bring Jazz on. Jazz, thanks for agreeing to co-host today, even though we're on a different schedule.
Oh, no problem, Betty Jo. It's a sad but important occasion, so I can carve out a little time from the political schedule for this. It just has to be done.
I'm so glad you could do that.